Thanks for joining today. This is Draft.dev's monthly webinar series. Clayton, Kast, account director here at Draft. We're a content strategy and creation and promotion organization. We've been doing this webinar series on a monthly basis to focus on the various aspects of DevRel and dev marketing. Today, we're joined by Karl, our CEO. We haven't had him on one in a while. It's great to have him back in the loop. And we're also joined by Ashley, who works over at ércule. They also handle a lot of like content strategy and analytics. Particularly interesting is their new tool. They are an agency, a service too, but their new tool, Osmo, actually focuses on like reviewing your content strategy and analytics. Highly recommend checking it out. Very cool. Today, we're going to be focusing on optimizing developer content for success. So we're going to be diving into how to create technical communications that resonate with our audience, strategies to optimize those efforts, then how to distribute and promote that content. We're going to use 45 minutes to hit on some talking points over the course of this call, but we're also going to do a Q&A at the end. So please take advantage of the Zoom Q&A functionality. We'll address those questions at the end of the call. And with that, Ashley, Karl, I'm going to start a little high level, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty. But I think, and we usually start all of our webinars this way, we've got to put it in optimizing content in the perspective of our industry and our technical space, right? So when it comes to optimizing content, how do you have to approach that differently in your eyes when it comes to developers versus, say, other B2B agencies or consumer spaces? What's sort of your elevator speech on that front?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Yeah, I can kick it off. So I try to think of developers as very solution focused. That's sort of like my mental model around developers is like they're problem solvers. They're trying to solve problems. They're looking for solutions. And so that kind of naturally breaks a lot of the like traditional marketing funnel. And you have to constantly be thinking about how do you build content that's going to make it easy for them to get to your solution, to either vet it, try it, all those things. And that's super important in how you think about building your content and the CTAs for your content and sort of all the things that inform your content. If you just think, okay, solutions focused, like that's going to take you towards sort of a different strategy and how you build and optimize.
Love that. I was going to start with some maybe too obvious things for this audience, but like some of the most obvious things are they are super technical people who are kind of averse to marketing in its traditional forms. They use ad blockers at a much higher rate than typical consumers. And they are very tech savvy, so they kind of know the tricks of the trade. So that's one thing to be aware of with developers. But I actually think you bring up a really good point, Ashley. That's that like, when I think about my day-to-day as a software developer back 10 years ago when I was really doing that hardcore, it was constantly using Google to figure out how I solve this problem. Sometimes it was a very high-level question, like, what is a data warehouse? Which is like I'm just a junior developer trying to learn the tricks of the trade and the lay of the land and what's out there. Or it's a super in-depth, long-tail query like, how do I get a React app to deploy onto Kubernetes cluster using XYZ other tools behind the scenes? And there's like 6 different combinations of tools that I'm looking for a tutorial. It's going to kind of help get me towards the solution. But I think you're right, Ashley. It's all about like solving my problem that I have sitting there right in front of me. And so when we think about content, it needs to serve that purpose. And this is one of the hard parts because a lot of times marketing teams come in and say like, oh, we want to make sure they know our product exists. I'm like, okay, great. Let's help them solve their problem, and then we're going to get some introduction there if it makes sense, but we're not going to shove it down their throats. It's like, this is the only way. Anyway, I'll get off my rant, but I think that's a really good way of looking at it, Ashley.
I totally agree. I know we're starting sort of high level here. A lot of our audience is familiar with this. We're going to get into the tactical as we continue to proceed through this conversation. But to frame the conversation, you're already addressing my next question is like, okay, we know there's some intricacies with this audience. What are the challenges that we most commonly see? Karl, you already touched on a couple, like the use of ad blockers. There's even some new ones coming up with AI. Maybe people aren't using Google as much to search and solve their problems. Maybe they're going to other tools. What are the big problems when like you guys start working with a new client that you're immediately like your brain goes, okay, we need to figure out how to apply the content strategy to address these issues?
Yeah, I think one, I just ran across the other day, and it happens a lot, is how do we differentiate your product versus the other options? And sometimes people, especially startups, will say, oh, well, there are no other options. We're the best. We're the only one that does it this way. And I'm like, okay, but they're solving this problem today somehow, right? Like it might be some old school technology you don't like and you think you're way better than. They have a solution out there. They're going to do something. They're going to ask their friend who's been doing development for 10 years longer, and they're going to figure out some way to solve this. So we always have to keep in mind that you're almost always, in today's environment, developer marketing, like trying to offset an existing solution. So just keeping that in mind and trying to figure out where you fit and really nail down your benefits. That's something that can be very hard because sometimes the benefits are super, super specific and technical and difficult to explain in a quick one sentence pitch. So that's one thing I've seen recently that's just top of mind, but I couldn't think of others. Well, you go, Ashley.
Yeah, I think a lot of companies that I've worked with in the space are actually pretty good at kind of talking about themselves and their technology. This makes a lot of sense because like thinking of developers as problem solvers, they need to know how they can use your tool to solve the problem. The product marketing is often pretty strong too. Documentation is usually really strong because it needs to be in order for them to get started. What I've seen some companies struggle with is sort of the outside in perspective of like, what are people doing in the world? What are kind of the use cases that would lead them to having that problem, that the very specific problem that they're searching for. So to go that sort of like one level up can sometimes be a challenge. The other thing that comes to mind, much more like tactical SEO-y thing, is just the keyword research for emerging technologies in the developer space and DevOps space, AI, are all sort of like lagging a little bit behind, and often aren't like the terms aren't well represented in the in the keyword tools. So that can be a challenge, and it becomes even more important to talk to your customers and your community and just kind of have that ear to the ground to make sure that you're writing about the most relevant things. And then keeping a super close eye on that. And I'm sure we'll get into this like in Google Search Console, and just kind of making sure that you're getting all the signal you can from the content that you write, but that the content that you write is sort of fed by your customers and your community, because you need to supplement it with keyword research, but you can't really rely on it entirely the way you can in some other industries.
Yeah,
totally agree.
Nate at Positional a couple months ago, was talking about this on the webinar, and I think that's a really good point. He did a lot of content marketing for a dev tool company anyways, a couple of years ago, and that's one of the things he learned really quickly was like the keyword research just doesn't match up with where actual search volume is, because developers aren't using, or they're not sharing as much of that data, given again ad blockers and other things they're using, but also these queries are kind of so niche, it's hard to gather a lot of keyword data on them. The other thing I was going to mention that I think is a really common tactical issue when it comes to producing and getting developer content strategies laid out is the buy-in that you often have to get from technical stakeholders who understand little to nothing about marketing and the way that marketing works beyond like just very high level. They are consumers of similar products, or maybe they even help build your product. So what I mean is often we'll see a problem arises very often for us when we come up with a plan for content, the marketing team or DevRel team approves it, and then the articles start to get produced, and let's say the CTO, who's not been involved with anything around the strategy or what it is, sees the first article and is like, that's not the way I would have said it. And it's like, that's not really productive, like at that point, to get involved, like once things are already done. Like we need you either involved at the beginning and to go the whole way through with us so we can understand how to work together better, or just let us do our jobs, So again, that's a little tactical thing, but I think a lot of marketing and DevRel teams underestimate the challenge that they have once they start to bring these pieces together at the end.
Totally agree. I like where you go, Ashley. We always preach use SEO as a tool, not like the word of God. Like let it inform you what to write about, not necessarily how to write it. Or the common one we always see is like clients, there'll be a topic that has no search volume. They're like, oh, let's not write about that. And then because it's a new or emerging topic, and then in 6 months, the person that wrote first about it has the top ranking article. It's like, see, maybe told you. We probably should have hopped on that one. Let's get into optimizing. So in a lot of our webinars, we've really focused on like the strategy of initially writing content towards this space. Let's maybe And you guys, Optimo is really good at this. And Karl, you run a lot of our strategy here at Draft when working with clients. Ashley, maybe you start. When you get a new client, you do an audit of their site. Where do you like to start looking for opportunities to optimize what they currently have?
Yes. So two things come to mind that come up pretty much with every company at some point. One is just the very basics of title and meta description being unique across pages. So a lot of folks, especially companies that are very like developer centric, and the developers who are building the product are also building the website, it'll just be kind of like the fastest path to getting the things up. And a lot of times there's not a lot of differentiation between title and meta tags, meta descriptions. And so just making sure that those are compelling, and reminding yourself that when you search, you get a list of articles, and it does matter what those things are titled in terms of how compelling it is to actually click through. So thinking of that stuff is actually pretty important, and bringing that to the front. That's just sort of a very, very sort of like basic thing that a lot of folks haven't taken a look at. Then there's just keeping content fresh and relevant. So we look at, do you have pages that haven't been updated since 2021? Do you have content that used to bring in a lot of clicks and impressions, and now it's slowly declining because that just happens? So we identify for people what those pages are where they're losing that, because as you invest in writing new content, you start to see that stuff go up on one side on the new content. But then if you're degrading across old content, then you're going to kind of balance yourself out. So keeping an eye on that stuff as well is super important. I can pause there and pass it over.
Yeah.
I've got some things.
Well, I love that you mentioned the freshness. That's something I've noticed, and I only have anecdotal data, but maybe you can back me up on this, Ashley, that a lot of queries in our space, in the developer space, Google tends to be favoring more frequent or more recent results instead of just purely domain authority or like the length of time that article's been out there. And I suspect it's because Google's pretty smart, and they know that the most recently updated version of this tutorial about how to, set Helm in Kubernetes and deploy to XYZ stack or whatever, like the most recent was probably the more correct, just given the fact that that kind of information changes every 6 months. And like the truth is, I often as a developer run into tutorials that were 2 or 3 years old that I'm like, this is unusable, or just there's so much I have to go sort of figure out because it doesn't include it. I'll also kind of add to that and say that a really great way to find opportunities for things to write about it, look at your competitors who have been around for 10 years or more and see their list of articles that are 5 years old and figure out what they were ranking for or are ranking for. Is there a way you can do a better version of it that's more up to date? It's low hanging fruit. It kind of almost feels like a cheat, because like sometimes when you're in a space where there's a lot of older competitors, it can be kind of simple to do. People are often afraid to go compete with like the big names in their space. But again, if this article is 5 years old, you probably can win it. It's not it just is a matter of recency. So updates, super huge. Like keeping content fresh is a big deal. It costs, unfortunately, a lot, and that's why a lot of people don't do it. But at least pick your top, the top potential articles and keep those up to date every year or two. The other thing I'll add that I've been noticing a lot is failure to either have a CTA at all, call to action at all, or a very inappropriate CTA given the level of the funnel that the piece of content focuses on. So what I mean is, like, a lot of dev marketing teams and DevRel teams especially, maybe all the CTAs are try our product. Now, if I'm reading an entry level sort of 101 type article on, I don't know, some kind of like mesh networking or something, I'm just learning about the space. Do I want to try your product? No, it's not solving my problem that I have today. I'm trying to learn about mesh networking and the intricacies of that. So a better CTA would be having some kind of asset that either is a downloadable, a webinar, pre-recorded webinar, a newsletter that you send out every week that actually tells people like how to get better as a data engineer or as a network engineer or whatever. Anyway, there's a million things you could do there that are better than just try our product as far as like it's actually going to be relevant to the audience. And I know it takes a little bit of time to develop these lead magnets, but there's a lot of quick ways you can get something together. And I think it's just kind of pure laziness that people don't do it. It's just they don't know. So really simple ways you can kind of like improve or optimize your dev content without going and, starting from scratch or having to completely rewrite everything. Again, a lot of times companies have been around for a few years, like it'd probably get better ROI just going through and updating 20 articles this next 6 months than writing 20 fresh articles. And they probably spend a little less money doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I like what you said there about the CTAs. We do a lot of optimizing CTAs. I think, like I talked a little bit about being very solution focused and like wanting to provide paths to developers to just go try the product. And that's super important, but also like your blog post CTA can be something that's a next step that's appropriate. I like to advocate for like just like places in the blog post, either sort of like an in-post call out or anything on a sidebar where they can just easily skip to like docs or trying it out. But then the blog post CTA kind of, as you're done finishing that piece of content, the next most logical step is there. And then we can play with that a bunch and like look at CRO and keep an eye on that and see what we should really be delivering as the next piece in the journey.
The other thing too, on the optimization side to look at, and a lot of teams miss here in content, is what content would help your sales team actually close deals in the next 3 months. And so what we'll have people do is marketing team, go to their sales team and say, what are some of the recent objections we've gotten around the product, around the way that it works, around the buying cycle, whatever. Can we write a few pieces of content that really help close those gaps? Whether it's something like a tutorial that shows a very specific setup that certain big companies have, let's say, or it's a more of like a feature in-depth deep dive that shows like how a certain feature works and has screenshots and lots of examples to help people see like, oh, this is what it would actually be like if we implemented this. Something like that. Anything you can do there, because when as a marketing team, you're always trying to show like ROI and you're trying to show the value of content. Like that stuff is super easy to plug it into a sales cycle, and now you've got something to drive real value. And like one or two of those can justify your whole year's worth of content marketing efforts, because it's like you could be closing enterprise deals with it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, when we talk about optimization, it's kind of like optimizing for what? And there's so many different ways that your content can perform. And at ércule, we're thinking a lot about how to get it to perform in search, but we're also helping people get the most bang for their buck with like tactics like
hanging fruit, right?
Yeah. What does the sales team really need right now? And let's optimize for search too, but let's also know that like we have other ways that we can think about this content performing.
It's like marketing isn't just top of funnel. We have to remember that. Like it's the whole way down, and sometimes the easiest wins are down there towards the bottom where we're just trying to get people over that final hump to actually purchase. So don't make it hard on yourself. Just I need another 100,000 page views. Like maybe not. Like let's make a sale.
We get that all the time. Or like the other one is you really want to write content that speaks to the CTOs or the CEOs. I'm like, well, who do you think that individual is talking to when they're shopping for a technically oriented product? They're going to go to the people that's going to be working in it and applying it every day. You need that bottom of the funnel content and awareness with them too. I think you guys even optimize towards stuff like that over at Ontimo, like buyer profiles and stuff like that. So, all right, talk tactics, talk big problems. The other big key here is promotion, at least with us. I know you guys too. Like when we start working with a client, we've got the content written or optimized, reworked some articles. We eventually want to get to the point where organic traffic's driving most of it, right? But usually that needs sort of a kick in the butt, boost it first, particularly if we're starting from scratch with a blog. How do you like to distribute the content effectively? I just sort of know where we stand. I'm curious to hear where you guys stand on your side of the house, Ashley.
Yeah, I think distribution strategy with developer content, you want to kind of merge it with your engagement strategy too, because what's really important is that you're not just dropping links in communities where developers that you're targeting are hanging out, but that you're actually authentically engaging in those spaces if you do plan to distribute your content in them. So I'm a big fan of like recognizing there are many types of developers out there. So you can't really just say, what are the developer communities that I can distribute this, or the developers or the subreddits. You have to sort of dig into, okay, for the types of developers that I'm targeting, if it's iOS developers or if it's infrastructure developers or front-end developers, and even within front-end developers, there's probably like 6 segments and languages and things like that. So really kind of figuring out where are the places that are worth you hanging out and spending time, because that's where people that you want to have your ear to the ground with are hanging out. And then those become places not only for you to distribute your content, but also for you to figure out what to write next and what questions do people have. Can you go write a piece of content that can answer their question and be truly helpful? That's a great strategy if you have the resources for it. And then beyond that, if you have resources for this as well, like building your own community is not always a bad idea. I would say there are some scenarios where it's not the best idea, but there is definitely a case to be made of having your own owned community where you can distribute things and distributing things to your customers. So those are kind of the first places that I think of. And then we do a lot of like looking at Reddit and different subreddits, and also what types of Reddit conversations is Google surfacing for your relevant search terms, and a little bit of Dev.2, Hacker News. There's definitely places that you can, LinkedIn is even now more so than ever a place where you can distribute developer content. So I think the first step is always like, what channels do we care about? What channels do the developers that we're writing this content for? What do they care about? Where are they? And that's kind of where we start with it.
I loved your focus on the beginning there. It happens to Karl all the time. We'll be able to call me like, so where do you guys plan on putting our content? I'm like, well, that's going to be highly dependent upon what comes out of our strategy conversation. There's not a one size fits all.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can dive into that a little bit more.
No, I agree. The context is really important. Some other things that I'll just mention, some quick tactics that you can use. And again, depending on what the content is and who it's going to reach and all that. Newsletters, a great place to push content, whether you pay to promote content in a newsletter or you just push it for free or you do a hybrid. Often what I've heard work really well is you sponsor a newsletter every 6 months and then you send them just organic content every month or two and see if they accept pushing it out for free for you, because they're always looking for content, especially again, if it's relevant. It's got to be, you can't just blast it out. But anyway, that's one good one. The subreddits you already mentioned, Hacker News is similar, depending on the type of content. It makes sense for some, not for others at all. And they're also, both those communities are very averse to self-promotion, so you have to be really kind of careful and aware, but it's possible. Syndicating content to Dev.2 and Medium and Hashnode, it never hurts, especially if you have an active community or maybe some of your writers or people can reach your blog to have active followings that are great. Another thing you can do is either pay to place or just submit as guest posts a certain percentage of your content to other places, whether it's a place like the New Stack or Smashing Magazine, or there's dozens of other little niche blogs that cover developer specific things. Dzone. All those are good options if you've got the budget for it, and again, you can kind of expose to a wider audience. So those are some of the ones that I think probably top of mind for me. And then the last thing I'll say, and then I swear we'll move on, is just think this content's evergreen. So you promote a really, a piece you spend thousands of dollars, hundreds of dollars at least writing, and then you promote it once and you think, okay, that's it, I'm done, shake my hands and move on. But like, why not come back to it in 6 months if it's still up to date, if it's still relevant? Like, do another cycle. That gets missed almost all the time. So again, especially if you're going through and refreshing content every year or two, definitely go re-promote it. There's nothing wrong with that. See if you can find better places to push it. I know it comes down to resources ultimately, but if you're going to spend thousands of dollars producing content, like spend a few hundred at least, taking some time to promote it.
Absolutely. Yeah. We are big fans of re-promoting, especially those pieces that do well, just keeping the conversation going and extracting different insights. There's so many things you can say about a blog post. So and a lot of people are afraid to promote it more than once, but if you say something different, nobody's really going to notice. And even if they do notice, it's going to take a while to reinforce sort of the message that you're trying to get across. So it's totally okay. I love what you said about newsletters. I can't believe I forgot that one. That's huge. And
underrated.
That's why there's two of us, because we gotta pick up the slack for each other. Yeah,
love it. And same thing, sort of figuring out what do the developers that you care about most read the most often. Podcasts as well. Same kind of targeting. And then also we encourage a lot of folks to just build their own newsletters too, and have that as a distribution channel. So same kind of thing as with communities, like if you have the right resourcing, if you have the right things to say, if you can kind of like think through a strategy for it, then you should probably do it if you have the resources.
Totally. You could do a whole webinar on it, and we sort of did, but you brought communities a couple of times. I always see the light bulb go off with new clients. Particularly if you're like open source or something like that, you already got power users. Like, I promise you, they want to be heard and write about what they know a lot about. Like, reach out to those people, source some content from them. Like, you may even trip your way into a DevRel hire, which is a really hard role to hire in the first place. Definitely something to look into. So next question, Ashley, I know you're going to have a lot of opinions on this one with Automo because it's a tool focused at like the analytical side of it. But let's get even more down the tactical rabbit hole. What are you really looking to measure and audit when you're diving into a client's library and producing content?
Yeah. So we're looking a lot at the organic side of things, and Automo actually looks at all of it works so that you see all your organic data. So you can click through into Google Analytics and see like referral traffic and all of that. But Automo is really sort of indexed on organic search. And that is what we look at as an agency too, is how we look across, of course, all traffic, but then organically, what is performing well for you. And we look at clicks and we look at impressions. We look at a ton of other things, but Automo specifically surfaces click and impression data, and it brings together your Google Analytics data for each post on your site, each page on your site, as well as everything for Google Search Console that page is ranking for. And you can kind of get a sense of, okay, this piece of content is ranking for a bunch of these different search terms. And that's how you can sort of unravel some of those really long tail keywords and things that people are searching for that are bringing them to your content to kind of pull you down to that like 201, 301 level. So we start with that as sort of like, if you're looking at your content library, trying to decide what should you be refreshing, what should you be optimizing, what new content should you be building. Just getting a sense for every page on your site of what the organic data looks like is going to give you a pretty good picture there. And that's one of the reasons we built Automo, was to make that super easy.
Totally. Hey, Karl, on our side of the house, our monthly analytics calls, where are you usually looking at when we're reviewing with our clients?
Yeah. So when we're coming into a new relationship with a client, there's a few things we're looking at. A lot of stuff Ashley mentioned, so I won't reiterate it. But the other thing I look for is specific articles that have either spiked or are still like just the like top 5% or something. And often this is what happens. This is 80-20. It's probably more like 90-10 or 95-5%. What I mean is, where there's 5% of your articles to get you 95% of your traffic, that happens a ton in organic search. And so sometimes what we're looking at there is like, how do we replicate, what did those articles do well? How do we replicate that to some extent? Or how do we go take that and like apply what worked there to the other content on the site? Another thing you can do there, again, kind of goes back to what Ashley was saying with the organic side, is let's say you all of a sudden have an article that's ranking really well for Terraform and Kubernetes or something like that, some combination of tech. Okay, great. How do we capitalize on that success and go spin out articles that talk about Terraform, Kubernetes, plus other long tail keywords, or Kubernetes plus other infrastructure as code type tooling, so that we can kind of interlink these together. They all sort of make sense that they'd be related, and Google seeing we're ranking well for one, it's a better shot that we're going to rank well for others. So that's some of the stuff we'll look at. The other thing too we will look at is, did a certain article or type of article do well on the Reddit circuit? So I was talking to a client recently and looking through some of their analytics, and they had a single article that was about like kind of setting up a very novel hosting solution. I'm going to try to stay anonymous here, so nobody's stealing their space, but like a really interesting, like novel way to set up a certain cheap web host, and in order to solve some problem, right? It was kind of like a $5 solution, but would normally be a $50, problem. Cool concept, and of course that did well on Reddit because it's kind of like there's a lot of people out there looking for premium and cheap things. So why not do a whole series like that? Again, we're trying to build traffic, we're trying to build some authority, assuming those are the types of users we want to attract. Like, we could do similar types of articles for all the other, more expensive hosting platforms to figure out cheap ways to make them cheaper. So there's a lot of times there we can look for like things we can replicate from social too. But anyway, that's probably a quick version of the answer. It ends up being very situationally specific very quickly. So it's kind of hard to talk in generalities without getting into like specific things we see in clients. I'm sure it's the same for you, Ashley. It's like when you're talking about those analytics reviews,
Yeah, that's right. Like at ércule, we have probably 100 different analysis tools that we have compiled over the years, spreadsheets and things like that. And then, of course, we built a product to help us do some of the core workflows. So there's a whole lot we kind of dig into and run a different analysis for a different like and find something else new, which leads us down another path. And kind of our job is to sort of do all this stuff and then surface it to something actionable for the client. So, but yes, absolutely resonates. Lots of things that you the places you find yourself in once you start really digging in.
Yeah, I think the big thing is like keeping in mind what are your goals around content, around the marketing that you're doing, and then what do we dig through the analytics to figure out, like, are we getting closer to those goals or further from those goals? What's distraction data that is just unimportant? Like, for example, we've had clients that are doing a pivot actively. So their old search, like analytics data is not really that helpful anymore. So the question is now, how do we take some of that past success and like try to leverage it into where they're pivoting today, which is going to be very different. Either the product's going to be different or the audience is going to be different. And how do we let some of that stuff just kind of wither away and go because we don't need it anymore? Complicated problems like that, it's hard to answer in like a general 5-minute response, I think. But that's where it gets really fun.
Agree.
So I feel like doesn't get brought up as much, but particularly in our space might be a little bit more relevant than usual. Like technical performance of the actual page that you're on. How do you guys feel like? I feel like you can lose your audience pretty quick if you got a slow loading site, like page speed, formatting, all that. What are your opinions, particularly with our audience on that front?
We probably see a lot of the same things come up.
Yeah. I think I've noticed it's less of a problem these days than it used to be 4 or 5 years ago, because I think most of the CMSs are getting pretty good. I say that with a little bit of pause because there's certainly still exceptions and a lot of bad ones out there. But I've just noticed in general, especially with the dev tools companies, they tend to be a little more on top of the tech stuff. They usually have pretty quick loading pages using static site generators and things like that to make like really fast response times. Ashley already talked about the metadata. I think that's a bigger technical mistake that's easy to miss if you're a developer who doesn't think about that sort of thing. Things like metadata, even some of the other advanced like tags. Again, those are probably not like, they're probably like in that band of like things to do to improve 5%, but they still, like, why not do them? Because they're so easy. And it's like free money. Like, yeah, totally. Free money sitting on the table. I'm going to pick it up and see if anybody lost some money. And if not, that's going with me, I guess. Right. So anyway, I think those are easy things you got to keep in mind. But technically, make your site fast, make it easy to read. If it's readable and navigable for humans, then likely Google knows how to crawl it. So, there's some technical meta tags you can use to improve things, but try to just cover the basics and make it easy for people to see what they need.
Maybe it's better to approach this from a different angle, Dev, because the thing we joke about all the time is like, if a dev can't find your quick start guide, they're already moving on to the next site. So maybe site organization is the better thing to focus on.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I will say there's a couple of things that come to mind on the performance side. One is YouTube videos. If you load the YouTube videos just straight out when you load a page, like we often tell people to load a facade, that one comes up, I think, a lot at site speed, but it's something that like developers can fix really, really quickly. And so, I think you're right, Karl, that a lot of times you show a developer that the site speed, the Lighthouse scores don't look good, and it'll be like hour and they fixed it. So
that's like
much less of a problem.
Yeah, as a developer, like that's the kind of problem I want. Like it's a very objective score that I'm trying to improve, and it's based on very straightforward tactical things I can do. Like that's like easy stuff. But the harder stuff is like what to write about, who to write it for, how to get a call to action for them. That's just the fuzzier stuff that's human and behavior related that often takes more mental energy.
The other like small point I'll make here too is like oftentimes we'll see marketing teams, once like you start getting some more funding, you start expanding, you hire some individuals, and a marketing team inherits like developer, they're starting their company, they'll just home cook like a CMS real quick, and then a marketing team inherits that like home baked CMS, and it's a nightmare for them to work with. They like won't even take Markdown. It's just always sort of a headache. And so just sort of go with the tried and true on that front if you have the opportunity. All right. What do you prioritize? Like, you don't even have a blog yet. Like, you haven't even started creating content. What's step one for some of these newer organizations? Like, so you got your Series A. It's it's time to start moving beyond just referrals, start getting your name out there. What's the low hanging fruit on optimizing towards your audience?
So definitely the documentation.
Yep.
Get the documentation in good order. Quick start to your previous question. Sorry to derail it, Clayton. But getting a quick start guide, some sort of thing to use the product or the open source or whatever it is that you have that is usable, or even if it's a sample app or tutorial or something like that. So getting that is like the first order of housekeeping. And then I would say after that, it's the product marketing and like the very non-fluffy product marketing. What is this thing and how do I use it and why should I care? And getting that in order. And then after that is when you start thinking about, okay, what other things could I be writing about? I have my ear to the ground in the communities where the developers that I'm thinking about every day are hanging out. What are they talking about? What if you have a sales team already and you have sort of like an early sales cycle going on? Like, what are those people hearing about the space that you're in? And then that's when we start like introducing sort of like what topics do they have volume? Where can we distribute them? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a really good order of operations. One of the other things I'll throw in there is like a table stakes thing that you need to get right is the degree of product market fit that you have and understanding who your true customers that you need to reach are. So often earlier stage startups that are at that Series A stage, they might have 10 to 100 customers, again, depending on what the kind of product is. And they may be still trying to figure out who their ideal buyer is. They haven't had enough sales conversations or actual closed deals. A lot of those early closed deals with referrals that the founder, knew the people and they want to work with them because they want to support their company, or they might be friends of their friends or whatever. So often it's very tempting to try to like scale up your customer base. But if you don't actually know who you're trying to reach with very specific terms, you're going to waste a lot of resources trying to scale before you really know the baseline. So defining and figuring out who your product or who the target market is and how to reach them is a big problem, but make sure you feel pretty confident about the direction you're facing before you go spend $100,000 on, marketing hires and content and everything else that goes along with it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Great points.
So last one I want to focus on before we do a little bit of Q&A. Looks like we have one question hanging out in the chat. And I sort of touched this on early. What changes are you seeing in content consumption, particularly like over the last couple of years? We've got some devs are really changing the way they're researching topics.
Ashley said the big one. She dropped the video.
Already dropped. So let's get into it. How much is that affecting how you guys are working or what you're recommending to, each of our clients?
Karl, okay,
I'll go for it. Yeah.
So I would say actually a lot of things are very similar to how they have been for the last, I don't know, I think I've been building content programs for developers for probably 8 to 10 years now. I was pretty early in on that whole thing. And so I've seen over time that it hasn't, there's a lot of things that haven't changed a lot. Write good expert content about things that people care about. And that's what I've always really loved about developer content is there's not a lot of fluff around it. You're writing about the things that are emerging as they're happening. And you're really writing expert content. And that's that also the stuff that Google really likes. So that's kind of nice. And one of the reasons that we sit in the space that we do. The biggest thing that we've seen is, Clayton, I think you mentioned earlier that AI overviews. I think that how developers are finding things is definitely changing. The search engines like search tools like Perplexity and, of course, ChatGPT, kind of changing how people look for content. And Google's still very widely used. You'll find a ton of data in Google Search Console. But there's also these other things emerging that you have to be thinking about. And so it's really like the same fundamentals apply in terms of optimizing your content. I think multimodal is a lot more important now. And so adding videos and images and diagrams, that was always important with developer content, though, is the sort of like what does this look like when you build the what's the engineering diagram that best complements this piece? So I think I would say like it's changing a lot, but the fundamentals are very much the same.
It's like the tactics may be changing, but it's always overreactions. Like new stuff comes out. It's like the strategy is still generally how you reach devs. Very
See, we're in this really interesting point in time right now, which we'll see how it resolves itself. But right now, let's just say the majority of developer-focused content on the internet is fairly high quality because it's written by real humans solving real problems for the most part. The problem all the search engines and AI tools are going to run into as content proliferates and is built with AI off of these at one-time reputable pieces, you start to get like errors introduced by AI written content. And so eventually, I think the problem we'll see all the big, AI tools and Google trying to fix is how do we sort out actually good quality content that is technically correct versus the stuff that is just, generated, and it's very low quality and there's no quality filter applied to it. So I think what you want to be doing is producing the good content, because ultimately that's what they're all going to start to figure out. They need to figure out how to reward it to make sure it stays in the algorithm. Because if Google loses trust with developers, so for example, if I start typing into Google and it's giving me false answers all the time, I stop using it and I go use some better AI tool. That's the biggest risk they have to losing their market share, which is huge right now, right? I mean, they're still 80-90% market share on search. So anyway, the unsolved problem right now is how are all these AI tools going to index the best quality content? I don't know what that's going to be yet, but that's one thing to think about. And at the end of the day, the people writing the super low quality, high volume content just generated off of other content, that stuff's going to get devalued. It's just a question of how they'll figure out how to do that, especially if it's not adding real technically correct information to the guys. So anyway, that's my only thought on the AI side of things. I agree. The medium might change with something. I have noticed that developers under 30 or so are very video forward, whereas those of us in the older bracket tend to be more written forward. That's just maybe a sign of the times, right? Like kids these days. But so I think video will get more important. Somebody in the chat asked a question about video. Big problem with video, though, I'll just quickly answer my thoughts on that, is it is not as easy to change as written documentation. Written documentation, I can go in there, edit any time, any single frame or screenshot when my product changes. Video, it's very hard to go in and edit specific pieces and timestamps of the video without completely re-recording. So if you're a small company just starting out, video is going to be very hard to maintain and expensive to maintain versus written. If you're a big company with a very well-established product that doesn't change much, video is a fantastic way to capture, give more value to users and make sure you're capturing the whole cycle of people who like all sorts of content. That's just my quick thoughts on that.
We're already diving into Q&A. Great transition.
It was related to what everybody.
Yeah, we actually started getting a lot of different media questions here. Ashley, do you have any views on this question in the chat about video, or sort of in agreement with Karl there?
Yeah, I think I agree with all of what Karl said. When I've been in the situation of do we add video to our documentation, it's always really a strategy question, because it is something you're going to have to put investment into and really figure out what does that resourcing look like, because the second it gets out of date, it's like, oh, especially if somebody came to your docs who really likes video, that population that Karl was referring to.
Kids these days.
The growing population.
Yes, exactly right.
and they watch the video but don't read, then that you could send them down a bad path. So it's just really important to keep that up to date. Or if you like, definitely having like last updated dates, that's going to be really helpful too.
That's what I think is more key.
Signal.
I think the audience has a general understanding of how quick the industry moves. Like there's only so much that can be done. Just make sure you're dating your version histories.
Yeah.
You know, any tool is being used, stuff like that. And like Karl, so we found the video tutorials that we work on have been most effective for larger, more stable clients that are not transitioning the product as quickly. What about, and this is interesting, seeing some blogs adding audio versions, AI or non-AI generated. Is this something that could add value? It's an interesting thought.
There's certainly an accessibility angle to that, and that's true of translated content as well. If one thing to think about, and this is probably not a Series A and seed stage problem to solve just because it does add complexity. But as you get bigger and more mature and you're trying to capture more of the market, thinking about that, like probably way more than 50% of developers, active software developers in the world are in the US and speak English as their native language. Now, a lot of them have adopted and know enough English to be very proficient in reading English articles. But if it makes sense for certain content to have it translated, that's something that could be a huge boost. So we've had a lot of clients in Europe also, like, if the company's native language is French or German, they're going to have content in English for, again, similar reasons. So translation, but then that kind of goes over to audio, where there is a percentage of the software development population that it has issues reading screens, or maybe they want to consume content via listening because they have attention issues and that it just doesn't work for them as well to read. There's lots of reasons that people might want audio content. So it's something to think about, and it certainly expands your reach. The AI tools are getting pretty good at transcribing stuff, although it's always a little bit wonky with technical things. So I don't think it's like it's the very first thing I'm going to address if you're just getting your fundamentals in place. But certainly if you're like trying to make sure you're reaching as much an audience as possible and make this content accessible as possible, absolutely great. Pretty easy thing to do.
That's sort of where my brain went, like, how's it going to start reading out code snippets to you? But yeah, totally.
Right. It gets a little, it gets messy, but some articles too. I mean, we're always writing a certain set of articles that are more general content, general information content. And,
top funnel stuff. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I would, anytime you can add any, no worries. Anytime that you can follow accessibility best practices, it's often going to you're going to reach more people because it's more accessible to everyone. And then two, like you are putting those words out there too, which are also searchable. So transcripts are great. Definitely having captions. If you're able to localize your documentation, that's fantastic too, to be able to provide that to folks. So those are great best practices in general, and I think they only help you like widen your audience.
Clayton, you're muted.
Muted. You think I would learn to break this habit one day? How to prioritize content refreshes. We talked about this at the beginning. I think that's situational, and sort of has more to do with diving into what's effective for where you're currently at. But
yeah. Also, like really looking at declining traffic. I think that's a super important one, because you can have a fantastic article that's evergreen and doing great in search, and if you'll be on the steady decline without fail if you're not refreshing it. So that's one of the most like low-hanging fruit places too. Is just like this content that is showing up in search. It was once doing really well, now it's kind of slipping. Like, what can we add to it to get it kind of going again? So great content, like great evergreen content. You just kind of have to keep an eye on it like that.
Totally. I think that's one category for sure to refresh. The other one is more bottom of funnel, like in other words, just talking about your product in specific situations. If it's out of date and it's high value to either existing customers or to sales pipelines, just making sure that like you don't want to be the one putting out information about your product that's incorrect. And so maybe there's like a handful of those articles you're like, we need to keep these up to date. They're just high priority pieces. That's something to think about too.
Totally. I love this next question. Are you seeing a situation where stakeholders now require very fast turnaround times of content compared with, like people cranking out a lot with AI? You guys sort of touched on this already, like how you need to focus on quality and like earning the trust of developers. So curious to expand on this. Like, how do you balance fast turnaround times with still doing high quality research production in our space?
Yeah, we're always pushing people to publish content faster. I'm sure you are too, Karl, and helping them like figure out their content ops. So if there's a stakeholder that's really pushing for content, a lot of times that's almost a good thing. Because you have alignment on being able to ship stuff. I think the opposite of that is actually a much bigger problem of you have like 3 or 4 people who have to review a piece of content and it has to really go through the chain, even when it was written by an expert author. So I think streamlining your content ops is like kind of the thing to do, and make sure that you have the right people and the right alignment around that process. And that should help with sort of like, you're in charge of your content program. You should be defining sort of the cadence, getting the alignment on that. And then we help teams build like an actual kind of content ops process that they get alignment from their stakeholders, so that then it's less of a what's going on here and more of a, this is like what we're planning to do. And we help them execute on that plan. And then that kind of helps make that space. I will say that I have seen that, with the introduction of ChatGPT, like just this idea that it's gotten better, but this idea that we should be able to like crank out tons of content, I think it's less prevalent in technical spaces where you just really can't really get away with that. But I definitely, like a year ago, if you asked me that question, I'd be like, yes, it's happening all the time, and people are just wanting to push out whatever they can because they're just really eager to try to get that search traffic. That's calmed down a bit. I'm very happy that it's calmed down a bit. And we're all kind of like exhaling and just building smart content processes. But
one of the things
I would say, I'll let you go. I was just going to say, usually that stakeholder that wants to go as fast as possible is also the exact same stakeholder that holds up an article and revision process for 3 months and it never gets published. Like, everyone just wants everything maxed out. And it's just like learning how to set expectations, building a good process internally. And then you focused on this, Ashley, but those stakeholders have got to have trust in the person, whether it's internal or external, that the person executing this content can publish effective content.
One thing that, it depends where the organization is in their maturity level publishing content. So the first, I think, step you want to get towards in publishing content is having a regular cadence. And in order to get there, what you need is a backlog, because things will get stuck or things will happen, right? So you need a backlog of 6 to 12 weeks worth of content that is like basically close to or ready to publish, ideally at all times. But, in reality, what happens is like you start with that and then it gets worse over time because things degrade and you leave the country for 2 weeks and all of a sudden nothing is checked, whatever. But like, have a backup plan, right? The other thing that is really important to understand with the technical content pipeline, approval pipelines, is that Ashley kind of alluded to this earlier. Don't have 6 people approve every single piece. Maybe assign 2 people to each piece if you really want to have a technical and non-technical reviewer on each one, something like that. But really try to simplify it. The other thing too is often if you'll assign developers to pieces, they'll get into stylistic preferences or even technical preferences that are not truly right and wrong. We see this a lot, Clayton, where a developer will come in to review an article one of our software developers wrote, and our developer used library X, Y, and Z because that was their favorite. It wasn't specified up front. And this developer comes in and says, well, why didn't you use library, A? That one's way better. Like, you need to start the whole thing over. And it's like, okay, I mean, it depends on the piece of if that was really integral to the content, we should have defined that up front. If it's not integral, we got to let that stuff go, because that's just like preference stuff that developers, of course, they're going to argue over tiny preference things. Like we get a little pedantic. So being careful, and this is where marketing teams can really struggle with this, because clearly they don't know. Again, if you're not technical, how do you know the difference? I mean, you don't think day to day about the difference between React and Angular, and in practice, sometimes those matter and sometimes they don't. And so you just really need to work with developers who can kind of be pragmatic in their approach to either reviewing or getting content through, and that, you know, doesn't always have to align with, unless you do have certain very specific preferences you set up front, like pieces can go through that have little variations on style and things like that. Anyway, that just some things that commonly hold up the process that it's good to think about and smooth out before if you can.
Q&A is followed up, so we're going to try and get to these last couple here. Tom added an addendum to his question, just asking for more clarification on how you balance like feedback discussions on content versus just posted. I mean, I would say interaction is always high. My favorite like sort of example of this is like clients will put something on Reddit and then people will come in and they want to prove their intelligence. So they'll start sort of like hammering on an article and it's like, it's still right. And you're still getting engaged. It's not that like that article is necessarily wrong. You guys still wrote good content. You're getting, that's Reddit. Like you're getting engaged. It's good. Like sort of rolling with it.
Yeah. Like reactions to content can be, I've seen things like, the client publishes something and then, you know, someone on Reddit says, well, this is just sucks. Or this is just stupid, you know, and they just pull it down because they're scared, like that the internet as a whole just thinks that. But like, you got to remember the people that take the time to sit on their computer and comment on Reddit, it's like the 1% of just crotchety people or, you know, whatever. It just don't take that as a sample size that is meaningful. The other thing to mention about Reddit and Active News is if your stuff gets downvoted to 0, nobody sees it. There's no penalty. The internet doesn't, you know, kill you for that. It's just that it goes away from their front page. That doesn't mean, don't take that as a personal judgment or as a judgment on that piece. It just didn't hit that day for whatever reason. So you kind of have to let a lot of that stuff slide. Again, trust your technical experts that review your stuff or write your stuff. They'll team you work with. Don't worry about the anonymous people on the internet. There always has something negative to say.
Yeah, and I think it's good to also have a group of like just really like customers or community members who you really trust, who you can say like, I like this idea of like creating like a content advisory board and having like 3 or 4 people, maybe 5, 6 that you are just sort of floating content to and getting feedback. Maybe I don't like the idea of like getting feedback before it's published, because anything that slows down your content ops is questionable. But getting their thoughts early on about what you should be writing and then feedback throughout the process, if you can build that into your content ops, great. If not, like get the feedback at the beginning and ask for feedback after you've published. And that can be a good way just to kind of cut through some of the noise and just make sure that you're surveying your customers and community with your content.
Okay, last question here, the last few minutes. We'll see if we give this person a quick here. Now, we sort of touched on this one too. Now with a ton of AI-generated content, how do you see search engine algorithms changing? Like you already talked about this, Karl, like Google has a stake in the game to make sure they're prioritizing correct information. So we're probably going to see search engines adjusting towards that, correct?
Yeah, I would say that the same sort of best practices do apply.
Yeah.
You want to have expert content written from people with experience that have authority on the topic, trustworthy content, like all of that stuff is probably more important than ever. And also like it just to make a broad statement, developers are pretty good at pattern matching, and when you put out content that's just not solid, like I kind of think of developers almost like crawlers. Like they crawl your content in similar ways. Like they're gonna notice like it's not like something's off, something's fishy. If you use AI tools to optimize a piece of content for developers, something's gonna come out kind of like smelling funky. So I think you just really have to stick to the best practices of developer content, which is have somebody technical write it. I'm not a huge fan of having non-technical people write developer content unless they're like paired up with an SME, really kind of interviewing them, and then getting their review before and after or before they publish. So a lot of that sort of like fundamental pieces of like best practices are still very applicable and still really matter in SEO. And I think another piece is like building content in that way is going to really build engaging content. And so developers aren't going to just like fall off the page, and your bounce rate's going to look better, engagement rate's going to look better. And that's all really important as well to how Google views your page's value.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, Google's goal is and will be and has been the same at a high level from a content building standpoint. That's to make sure that it's delivering the best results possible, plus some ads that they make gobs of money off of with every single query, right? So ultimately, organic search is not going to die, but I may expect to have AI generated results, with links to sources or something more often on certain queries than I used to in the past. So I don't know. I mean, it will change, but at the same time, like Ash was saying, I think fundamentally, you still got to be contributing. If you're going to do content marketing and you're going to produce content, it's got to be high quality and accurate and technically interesting. Otherwise, like, just skip it and do something else. If you want to go send cold emails, you can do that too. Just go try that. If you want to just do ads, you can do that too. Just go do that. But I wouldn't try to game Google. They're pretty smart over there.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for joining today. We'll send a recording in the coming days to all the attendees today. Ashley, Karl, thank you both. If anyone needs help with content, check out Draft.dev or Optimo. Great tool over there too. Otherwise, join us in October for our next one, everyone. Thanks again. See ya.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Okay.